thanks for coming down to do the show. First time. We've been around for 41 years. Sorry it took so long to get you all here.
Well, we're glad we made it. Thanks for inviting us.
Why in 2005 did you guys decide to take a break at that point? Not really knowing if there would ever be a round two.
I think we felt like the album we had done, The Woods, was such an achievement. It had kind of pushed the band in a really strong direction. So we felt like it was kind of a good time to take a break, actually, because we'd done something that was such a different thing than people had expected. Yeah, I mean, I think that for people that are in bands, it's such an intense job. You're always thinking about touring or writing or recording, and it can kind of be almost like a bubble that you exist in. And as a writer, you want to do other things with your life, to have other experiences so that you can, draw on that when you want to write a song. So sometimes you have to kind of get away from it, I think.
We were all busy with other projects. I was working on or still am, I guess, a television show called Portlandia, and Janet was playing in other bands, and Korn had a solo album and a family. And I also think there was just a reticence in terms of going forward without the kind of material, the kind of album we wanted. So we were very deliberate and intentional about when we wrote and how we wrote, and it was logistically hard to kind of come together for too long. So we would carve out blocks of time, and but in the end, it ended up being almost as intense and urgent as it had ever been. It's just that it went over a longer period of time. But those writing periods, which would last like a couple days or a week, were pretty intensive. And then we recorded in a really short amount of time. So I think the album speaks to that same kind of like fervor that our earlier records did. It's just the methodology was different.
For us, we're in a very fortunate situation in that people, over the 8 years that we weren't playing, people developed like a kind of a hunger for the band. And we found that there were a lot of new people listening. So when we came back in this sort of modern era, which is very much, you deliver your music online, you communicate with people on the internet primarily before you get to your shows. People were really excited and eager and searching it out. I think it's hard when you're one of a million bands, you're one of a million great records in a year, and it's hard to get your voice heard. But luckily for us, I feel like we're fortunate in that when we came back, people really wanted to hear what we had to say. I've been in other bands that, it's a lot harder to be heard because there's such a clamor. There's so much information and so many bands that you're just sort of exhausted as a listener, how do I find my music? It's a little bit more convoluted and crowded. But for us, our fans were just kind of dying for it like we were. So I feel really lucky.
I mean, I think we can never really separate, the personal and the political from what we create. I think that's always been part of the ethos of this band. It's how Korn and I approach the lyrics. And I think this album, it is couched in a much more like melodic vernacular, I guess. I mean, there's big choruses on this album, but I think, there are politics on this record. There's, it to me, it seems like a continuation of this, stories about disempowerment and, trying to find, hope when a lot of people feel despairing and, looking at a lot of inequities. And so I think those themes and the theme of power is explored quite vastly on this record, and disempowerment too. So I don't know, that's always been part of the story, and I think we've just never really divorced ourselves from that. But the songwriting comes first, and I think politics and those kind of messages are great when they're in songs, but it still has to be a great song. Otherwise no one ever remembers it. I think if we learned lessons the first time around, it's to really try to live in the moment with the band, and that can be a very galvanic quality, to just kind of sit in the moment and feel how like explosive that can be. You know, if we're just focusing on the show, focusing on the album, focusing on the next tour. So we take it day by day. The shows on this tour have been wonderful. The fans have been amazing. We've had opportunities like playing ACL, just things that we've always wanted to do that feel really special. So I think just trying to enjoy those, and then we'll see what happens next.